Hello. It's been a while. 12 odd years, matter of fact. And the channel is still here. And I only found this out recently. And another thing that's happened recently is I've returned to Warcraft. Classic Warcraft. And hardcore classic Warcraft. And I've been absolutely loving it. It's a mix of nostalgia, downtime for me. Obviously, life has changed from the Landro gaming of 12 odd years back, 13 odd years back. Well, it's been a while. It really has. And now, family man, businesses to run, and Warcraft and hardcore classic just lately over the last month or so has become my downtime. And of course, like Landro of old, not much has changed. I like to heal. I'm a healer at heart. I like to keep people alive. I like to be a very important part of raid and party makeup. And in the hardcore challenge, which has just been just a breath of fresh air for me, back to vanilla, back to classic WoW, and the leveling being such a core element of the game, it's just been delightful. So I thought, let's get some videos back on the go. The channel's still going. It's had some good views over the years. 150 odd thousand views. But for something that's not been active for so long, it's quite impressive. So pretty proud of that. As a Warcraft player, retail, I didn't have the same time for the daily monotonous grinding. I've still got very active, or the same characters that you'd see on this channel from days gone by. Shiftster, Landro, they are still there. They are still there with all those mounts I hunted back in those days. That account is still active, and that is the account I'm playing on now, but in the classic realms. And here we are with the first iteration of what I'm going to be adding to this channel in the coming months, which is healing dungeons. And we're going to start with the classic Deadmines, and what classic brings to these dungeons is an element of nostalgia, and what hardcore brings to them is an element of risk. At any point, a mispull, a mistake, an ooming in the wrong time can be fatal, and it can be, in the world of pixels and World of Warcraft, on Azeroth, in hardcore classic, it's the end of your character. You have to roll again if you die. There's no resurrecting, there's no second chances. It is what it is. And what you find is, the first time you play it is an anxiety, a kind of dopamine fix that I haven't had from a game for quite a while. So I've been thoroughly enjoying it. And this makeup, this group, I only found out today, funnily enough, that there was a looking for group channel, which I've now added myself to. They were looking for a healer, and I'm playing a Paladin, level 20. Entirely geared out with strength gear at present, but I am trying to build my way towards an intellect set. My talents are relative. They are healing talents, and my classic heal bot UI is there. Left hand controlling my character, right hand controlling my UI, heal bot UI, with keybinds and key modifiers to do all my healing. I found that's the way I've always enjoyed playing, and that's the way that I want to play the game as is now. I find it very intuitive for me, and I heal pretty well most of the time like this, so I enjoy it. A bit of a big pull here, which brings me actually to a very interesting notion that this is a retrospective commentary of this first dungeon. As I said, I'm a family man now, and I had 2 kids playing Fortnite behind me, so I couldn't do the audio in real time, but I will do for future dungeons. I've got several characters. I'm going to do a lot of priest and paladin healing content. And what you find in this is a level 19 tank, so it's on the low end for the Deadmines. So the healing is perhaps a little bit more intensive on mispulls or double pulls than it would otherwise be. So as long as you manage your mana very well, you should be good. You should be good. I keep my cooldowns active, and it's one of the things that Paladin has going for it. My priest is fantastic. I think I'm level 43 with the priest now, so I'll be doing some Scarlet Monastery runs on the channel with my priest. Priest, the way I describe priest in Hardcore Classic is slow and steady, and if you pace yourself right, it feels very, obviously as a classic priest player from back in the day with Landro. I also have Landro in this variant of the game. I find steady, and it feels relatively safe, and I feel what I've got with Paladin is less tools at my disposal. So at this point, level 20, I have 2 basic heals available to me. Flash heal, flash heal, I'm back in priest mode now. Holy light, and hopefully I'll do it now in a second to show you. So there's a holy light there, and flash of light, which is the fast, quick, a fairly good mana efficiency spell that doesn't hit very powerful. So there's a flash of light there. And what you tend to do in Classic and in Hardcore, and it's something that you don't really do in Retail nowadays. Retail is a fastest finger first type style of healing. You very rarely mana management is key, and where you can utilize your mana management is 2 key conduits, and the first one would be a notion that is not specific just to paladins, and that is mana weaving. And what you're doing is you're going in and out of spell casting at 5-second intervals, which is a classic prerequisite to start your mana regen. If you don't cast a spell for 5 seconds, you start to regen. That is very, very key to learn very, very quickly. You don't have any debuffs, despells, unfortunately, for this buff that's just gonna, or debuff that's gonna rack down on us. So, but yeah, the basic premise is, of course, that we mana weave, so we weave in and out of combat. Is that the right way of putting it? No, you're still in combat. You weave in and out of spell casting, and you can do that by myriad different ways. With a paladin, you've got your melee abilities. You can let the tank or target get a little bit lower and do a holy light, which is a really powerful spell. So you can go out of combat. You can see my mana's fully regen now, and you can do that. The other way you can do it, and this is something that is class wide as well, which is, and this is something that definitely doesn't happen on retail or latter iterations of the game, the down-ranked versions of the spell, which cost less mana and do less healing. Sometimes that is the best thing to do. So I've got my keybinds set up thusly on my healbot, so using my healbot UI, I've got several ranks of my healing spells at the point I am now with Luminous, which is 2 spells I can cast in a healing perspective. Flash of Light only has 1 rank, and Holy Light has 3 ranks. So I can rank the spell down to cost less mana and do less of a heal where relevant. And I'll point that out when it becomes apparent as this dungeon goes on. So this is the early part of the dungeon, which is, we're not even in the Deadmines yet. We're doing some of the early quests that some of the new players to this area haven't done yet, and then we will go into the Deadmines dungeon, and I'll talk a little bit more about what I'm doing in real time. The talent build I've gone with is a sort of standardized Holy Paladin leveling build. So Holy Paladin is very interesting because you get access to some mana reduction, some increased healing, and you get action. You get available to you are something that's very important, which is lack of healing knockback, and where that's relevant to leveling, which is the key concept of this challenge, the hardcore challenge, is to get to level 60 without dying. And you'd be surprised how few players do that, or you won't be if you're a classic Warcraft player. If you're a retail player from today, leveling is very, very different to what it was back in Classic, and the nostalgia of leveling being a feat in itself is driving a lot of the player base at the moment. The server that I'm on, very, very busy. You see it when the world buffs drop. But we're going in the dungeon now, so I'll start to focus now a little bit more about what this video is about, which is a dungeon, Deadmines, 5-man with appropriately leveled characters. So we've got a level 19 tank, I'm a level 20 healer, a couple of level 21 hunters I believe, and a rogue who is I think level 23, and that becomes apparent because the other thing that happens in Classic that is probably not as prevalent nowadays is the notion of threat being real from a DPS perspective and from a healer's perspective as well. You'll see a couple of times where I get a crit two-hander swing as I've cast a heal, and you get a bit of threat off that. So my basic premise with this dungeon, I'm in totally DPS gear. I haven't got. Oh no, I tell it like I've got one spirit-based shoulder top of my head. One of the reasons why it's viable to still be able to heal in this is that buff I just cast there, which is Blessing of Wisdom, which gives you a very good mana regen throughout the dungeon, and it's a cracking buff to anybody on or within a raid or within a party that has a paladin in. You've got Blessing of Might, which I put on all the melee classes, and Blessing of Wisdom, which I put on those classes that are more interested in their mana regen, of course me being one of those. So how can you heal dungeons in this DPS gear? So early doors, the access to the spells is the key element. You won't have much gear going into the dungeons at this point. My mage, for example, still has 3 or 4 slots of gear that I don't even have, stats on. Whereas my paladin is mostly stacked at the moment with stamina and strength and a spirit shoulder. It's a leveling element there. You can see 162 swing with your melee weapon there, so that's just passive damage I'm doing as I'm letting my mana regen. See if I'm almost at full mana now. Can let my tank get a little bit low, get a swing off, and then you can do a holy light, and it pretty much tops them off in their entirety. And that's kind of what you're doing. Where you're powerful as a paladin in dungeons and where they are excelling as healers in the hardcore challenge is 2 key elements. The buffs they bring are really, really powerful, and the cooldowns they have are super, super powerful. So even at this level now, level 20, I've got Divine Protection, I've got Lay on Hands, and using those when chaos ensues can literally save people from dying, and dying takes you back to your starter zone. Where I think I enjoy this more than anything is just the notion of camaraderie, how noticeable your skill set is to the group when you're a healer. So obviously I've got mining and engineering as my 2 key sub-professions, so you'll see me mining some tin as we go around, making sure that my tank is thoroughly safe. I wouldn't do that in lieu of keeping my party safe, so obviously you'll see a lot of talking in the chat about what I'm doing and when I'm doing it. The first boss we come to here, Zor, and you'll see an element of what I'm trying to do here and what this dungeon is about in some respects. You can see the aggro is flip-flopping between the tank and the rogue, so I'm trying to get behind the target and he keeps spinning round to where I'm stood, and that's understandable when you've got a high level DPS and a lowish level tank. So your role here, quarter health is always my signal to start healing for the most part. If my tank has lost a quarter of their health, I'm looking to get them topped up, and that's prevalent to lower level dungeons. Obviously there's some preemptive healing you want to do if you know there's a spike of damage coming, but for the most part you can tell from how fast your tank is losing health, or what skill you need to use, whether you need to do a flash of light for a fast heal to get it off quickly, whether you need to do a holy light to fully top off your tank, or whether the correct heal is a ranked down spell. Something else that we bring to the table has just been examples there for you. So Hammer of Justice to use as a very good interrupt. It can be used in several instances on some of these bosses as well. So some of the classic prerequisites to boss fights are slightly different. So you can't really stun as much nowadays in retail, but some of these dungeon bosses can be stunned. And that Hammer of Justice, which we'll see later on in the dungeon, can be incredibly powerful. So you're pinging your mini-map, telling people about the patrol behind you, just in case, because as we have spoken about here in terms of what it is within this hardcore challenge, a pulling of an additional pack that isn't noticed, or at the wrong time can be lethal, and lethal in this is re-rolling, and that's not what we want. All re-rolling is going back to the start screen. So the premise that I use, and I advise all healers to do, be observant of the surroundings. We perhaps have a little bit less tunnel vision available than some classes. When you're DPSing, sometimes the tunnel vision kicks in. When you're a tank, your mind perhaps is elsewhere. As a healer, you can look around, you can mine if you want to, but you can look around, you can be more observant of what's occurring around you. You can see my playstyle is constantly spinning cameras around to look to areas of the map and the dungeon that I can't see, especially in these small dungeon vibe you get the Deadmines. So you'll see me spinning the camera around quite a lot. I try and help out if a mob is escaping where possible. Sometimes that's not relevant. Sometimes you can use your tool set to be helpful there to any of the mobs that are escaping. You don't have slows, but you do have judgments and hammer in the environment and the necessity that's sometimes called for. But for the most part, you're just managing your mana, managing the health percentages of your raid, your party, making sure they're buffed. As I say that, I notice my Blessing of Wisdom has fallen off here. I've got on my Healbot UI a little bit of help with Blessing of Might on my various members, so I've got that set up to indicate to me by changing the colour of their text, or the background of the text I should say, if they need a rebuff. I have got it set to tell me if the healer is needing a Blessed Wisdom. Obviously I've not got that set up correctly because it's not telling me at this point, so there'll be a couple of minutes before I notice here. And with your mana, you can see it's regenning because of the 5-second rule there, and you want to try and, if you can, it's hard to do sometimes, but you look where you've got your last tick of mana, and if you can try and get your heal off just prior to that tick, you can get just subsequent to that tick, you can get the latest tick of mana back before your heal is cast. Now, what Classic does is it doesn't take the mana until your cast is complete. If you look here, it's only when the cast is complete. So you'll see a lot of my cast cancelling by moving is the way I do it. Like I said, my left hand is controlling my movement and my right hand is controlling my UI for some respect here. And you'll see that sometimes I cancel casts if I feel it's not needed, it's not appropriate, because the mana doesn't go until the cast lands, which is really nice. This is pretty crazy, pulling 4 of these mobs as a level 19 tank. Very interesting, and you obviously have to be on the ball. There's a cast cancellation there. You see a little side step just to cancel the cast because I was preempting some big damage spikes. It never really came. What happened here is the threat got spread around the raid a little bit, or around the party, so I'm flash of lighting my DPSs. Another flash of light, and I think I'll go to a Holy Light, ranked down on Lowly Hunter, and then a full power Holy Light. And you can see, keeping everybody topped up, I'm still about a third mana, not far off. And that's pretty good mana management on that type of pull, where A, the threat got spread around, and B, it's 4 powerful-ish mobs. You don't want to be doing that too often. That, yeah, could be problematic. But obviously then you need to drink, and I think this is where I notice when I'm drinking, is like, where did my mana go then? Blessing of Wisdom. Blessing of Wisdom would have kept me some mana up there, and those little mistakes at this low level aren't catastrophic, but obviously as the levels increase, I want to make sure that is dealt with that buff notification. So we'll get that sorted. And then here, what you want to do, like I said, ideally you don't want your tank to pull as you're buffing. Buffing costs mana, but that's fine. That's fine. I'm not quite sure where he's gone. He got feared, I think, into that corner there. So Mr. Rogue here gets, or Miss Rogue gets the DPS, gets the threat. So rank down Holy Lights, flash of lights, just to make sure the Rogue doesn't get in danger there. You can see a cancelled flash of light to a full powered Holy Light, again, just to make sure that the Rogue is fully topped up. And I'm just sitting there in melee, a little bit of melee on the boss, so passive melee swings, don't use mana. Those extra little bits of 138 damage do add up on these encounters, so just getting them off. As you can see, once the healing stops, will this show it? No, there's a couple of big heals there. I was hoping that would show a couple of swings there as I healed. So when you come out of your healing global cooldown, it goes back to your melee global cooldown, and hopefully you get some swings in, and that little bit of damage does add up. The Deadmines is a very interesting. There's lots of deaths in Deadmines, and mostly it's because it's some of the first dungeons you'll be running. And if you come from a retail background, then it's perhaps not quite so obvious sometimes that you can't. It's much more forgiving, or unforgiving, I should say. Sorry, unforgiving if you make mistakes. And I think that's probably the key element to a lot of deaths in Hardcore Classic, is coming from an environment where you are punished from pulling literally one too many mobs. The key death causer are roots and snares and respawns, the hyper spawns, and all these kind of things out in the open world are a big cause of death. Have a swig of tea, because my dungeon raiding setup of choice is primarily a cup of tea to my left, nice hot cup of tea, packet of mints to my right, and just sit and enjoy the hardcore challenge. When it comes to loot and what I'm looking to roll for from this dungeon, obviously I would like some healing gear. I'm working towards a dungeon healing gear offset, but my main motivation is what I'm going to do to level in the open world. Running dungeons are fun, they are riskier for the most part. There are quests obviously that supersede the risk of a dungeon, but for the most part the dungeon is just about quick XP and getting some loot. So when I come in, if I get some nice healing loot, it's a bonus, because it makes the subsequent dungeons a little bit easier in terms of having some stats that are relative to my healing. Whereas if I get some good DPS drops, that as long as I'm not taking too much loot off anybody else, if there's the DPSs in here that need the loot much more than me, I will probably pass on a lot of that loot. But every now and then it'll be nice to get a decent two-hander or some upgrades. So you can see here I wasn't too keen on that, but I am always conscious of what people's gear is when they're looting. There's some. So I was interested here to see why the tank needed on that, and I assumed at that point, I could leave that a range of the inspect, but I assumed it was more to do with anyway, and he charged that range again to be a genuine upgrade, and sure enough it was. And as you can see, he needs a lot of gear, so he gets some nice drops through the dungeon as well. I've got, like I say, when it comes to the healing toolset of a Paladin, comparatively to the Priest, which is the other class you'll see me do a lot of dungeons on, it's much more limited as a healing toolset, but there are some elements that are unique to the Paladin, and I think I use some of them here. So Hand of Freedom is something I use sometimes on my tank if they're rooted or snared. Obviously your Priest has Dispel, so magic type effects that are causing that can be useful. You can dispel them, but if they're non-magic, or if you don't have the magic dispelling capability such as a Paladin, you can use things like Hand of Freedom. You'll probably notice something here of interest. I'm pretty much ignoring the pets in terms of healing. That's mostly because I just don't have the mana at the moment. If I had a bit of gear, when I'm on my my Priest, for example, I'll do ranked down reviews sometimes on the pets to make sure that they're topped up. But my priority is, for the most part, making sure that the group itself is taken care of. And if I have any spare mana, then sure enough I can sink it into a pet every now and then. So you can see the buffs requirements pop back up, so they've gone purple. It means I need to rebuff. At that point, I saw something in guild. I'm just looking why I went to guild chat. Somebody got a nice drop from Razor Bend down. So one of the things I do as well now is I'll quite often, especially with Landro, perhaps more so than Luminous. Luminous is quite a new character. I've got what have I got? A level 26 mage, level 20 paladin, level 43 priest. I feel like sometimes I just don't want to just grind on the same character, so I'll flip-flop between various others. But what I find with my priest is I'll get messages now from people I've dungeoned with previously saying, would you like to do X, Y, or Z? And that's a sign A, that you've done okay in the dungeon, and B, that people trust a good healer. If they've had a good experience with a healer, you would be more inclined to message that healer than chance one that you don't know. And of course, like I say, my entire history within Warcraft, back from when I was hardcore endgame raiding to Mythic Plus Dungeons more recently to PvP, and it's been around healing. I feel like I'm probably a better healer now than I ever was, but of course my reactions of 20-year-old Kev from yesteryear aren't quite the same. So that's where you might notice some of that in the weeks to come as we go through more challenging dungeons. But what you'll probably notice as well is just my observation skills of the dungeons, and how very rarely I panic, because that comes with years and years of being able to heal, and also it comes from having a comfortable setup, and it's something I cannot recommend enough. Whenever I've tried to speak to people who are struggling with healing and they ask for advice and tips, what's your setup, what are you using, what add-ons, if any, do you use, what keybinds do you use, where do you have your spells set up on your UI. As you can see, a lot of my spells are clustered together, so you'll see my, what I call my oh shit buttons, F6, F8, F9. I'm not quite sure where F7 has gone from there, out of curiosity. But anyway, you'll see them clustered together. You'll see T and B as easy to access keybinds. So T is an interesting one. T is the decoy dummies, which are actually life-saving in Classic. So it's a decoy you can drop that taunts targets around you. And having that keybound to T may seem odd, but if you can imagine, my hand is on Q, W, and E quite a lot, just to move my finger across a couple of buttons to be able to place a target dummy if required. And I think, like, as I'm going back to the point I was making, when you've got a UI you're comfortable with and you're familiarised yourself with where your keybinds are and your modifiers, so a lot of what I do is built around modifiers, so using left click, shift left click, control left click, alt left click, shift control left click, shift alt left click is 5 in essence keybinds, and you're using those keybinds in a very homogeneous way, so you're pressing the same buttons. Your same click is the left click, it's the same click, and the modifiers change it. And then you add your middle mouse button, there's another 5. You add your right mouse button, there's another 5. You've got 15 potential spells within the 3 main buttons of your mouse just by clicking, and it's so intuitive, and I've grown used to that over the years. So when I say to people, when people struggle with mouse overhealing or keybinds to target certain party members and stuff like that, it's all well and good, but as you can see, can you be offensive with your left hand like I am? You see my offensive buttons are on my left hand moving, because you're never doing an offensive and moving, or very rarely, and then my right hand controlling my healing, and my eyes just looking straight ahead of me. It's almost like you're touch typing, and that's something I've always been very good at, is touch typing. So when it comes to healing in this way, it's almost like touch typing. That's the way I look at it. When it comes to the different classes, you'll find there's certain spells that you regularly use. This is quite a big pool, is it? No, it wasn't. These are all fairly minor mobs. You'll find there's certain spells such as Flash of Light and Flash Heal, Holy Light and Great Heal, Renew and Regrowth and stuff like that. There's things that are similar, and when you're getting into the mind of the healer, you'll find that most healers have a very similar tool set. My main 2 retail characters at the moment are Landra, of course, my priest, and my shaman, which is L'Aurora, who is the one I use for Mythic Dungeons. The mobility of L'Aurora was epic, and that's why I went to Mythic Dungeons with L'Aurora. But you find that there's a certain element of similarity with most of the classes, so Prayer of Healing, Chain of Heal, that kind of thing. So it's very interesting when you're comfortable as a healer how easy it is to adapt to all of the healing classes. When it comes to Classic, without question, priests are the #1 utility healer that most groups want. Paladins are right up there, but it's just so good on a priest. There's so much they bring to the table from a group-wide perspective. But I'll talk more about the priest when I'm on the priest, doing a dungeon with the priest. For now, we're in the Paladin. You can see the notion of a couple of 2-hander swings there to do some damage in amongst moving around, making sure everybody is relatively topped up. You don't need to, like I said, I was about half mana here. This is a point of potential random respawn of mobs here, so be a little bit careful. For the most part, I want to be half mana or above going into a pull. For a boss pull, obviously you want to be at max mana where possible, and that revolves around being vocal. If I'm struggling for mana, generally speaking, a decent tank will look at your mana pool and will pace the dungeon accordingly. Sometimes you do have to little nudge, say, oh, just doing a rebuff, especially with Priest. Again, more prevalent with the Priest than it is with Paladin at the moment. Paladin buffs seem a lot cheaper. Just give a shout out, mana break. There's no humility in saying I need just a moment here for X, Y, or Z. And the I did wonder why the rogue didn't pick the lock there, but maybe they haven't got that tool set yet. You can stop these mobs running down if you pick the lock. It's, yeah, have the humility. If you see a mob, if you're unsure, it's better. There's a hand of freedom there to allow the tank to have a little bit of mobility where needed. Yeah, have the humility to ask. Don't go into the dungeon if you don't know the boss, don't know something, just ask, because people would much rather you ask than cause 5 people potentially to have to start again at Northshire Abbey. This is the single most dangerous part of Deadmines, without question. The little ramp up to the boat. These mobs hit a little bit harder for a start, which is always something to be aware of. When you go into this bit, the mobs get much harder hitting, but also there's potential to mispull and make mistakes here. You're on a narrow little bit of wood with, you see it's quite densely populated with the Defias. They are here. We found their base. We're heading towards VanCleef. But these, especially Squalls Shapers, very, very hard hitting. They do a big AoE chill effect as well, which is a bit of a problem, especially when you haven't got magic dispel. Oh, something my old priest used to love was Master Spell. Unfortunately, that's not something we have in retail in Classic, because that would have been a great spell. But Paladins, you have to make do with Hand of Freedom for now. You haven't got magic debuff. So this is quite a big pull for this area. So it's only 3 mobs, you might say, but they are pretty hard hitting, and got to be careful here. So like I say, I just hammer Justice 1 just to mitigate a little bit of damage there. It turns out the Hunter gets all the threat here, so got to be alert here. Obviously, one of the things you do have as a Paladin that you don't necessarily have as a Priest. Priest has a lot of shit stuff that you can deal with. Another Hand of Freedom there on my tank there. I'm just pointing it out for you so you can show he's immune to little slowing effects for a while. But one of the things you don't have so much of on Priest is those buttons that can save your teammates. You have Power Word Shield, of course, but you have a lot to save yourself. When it comes down to a Paladin, you have an awful lot of tools to help your. There goes another little example. I think I did that just to show you what Hand of Freedom does there. You have a lot that can help. Now this is interesting. I try and stop this mob here. My Hammer of Justice is on cooldown, but it ends up pulling the mob. So these are the moments where things can happen. So I very quickly noticed that they pulled, because you can see the boss encounter timing at the bottom there. So the Deadly Boss mobs announces that the boss fight has started. So I started being a bit alert at that point. It got a bit messy here, I'm not going to lie. This is the moments where things can potentially happen. Now I don't want to use my Hammer of Justice there, because I need that for the boss, and you'll see why in a second. Mana's getting a bit short, so I preemptively pot here. I don't think I can get around it. As you can see, there's still 1 mob up, so I got a preemptive pot off. And I thought, yeah, let's just play it safe, make sure I got the mana at my disposal. Where you need Hammer of Justice, if you can stun smite here, so I do it at 65% or just a little bit under because they spiked him, it stops the stun on us. So we now don't get stunned when he goes over to get his weapon, change his weapon, we can just follow him over and just nuke him down. So having access to your stun there at that point is probably much better than wasting it on an ad that was running towards a hunter that I could potentially stop if needs be. Obviously the tank said there that, you know, the mob got away there. Like I said, I managed to get 1 judgment off on him, but it didn't quite finish him. And obviously if I'd walked any further forward, I potentially could have got the boss on me, and that would have been catastrophic. So at that point I dinged, which is interesting. So a bit more in my holy light. You got a brief look at my talent tree there. You can see it's in its entirety at the moment. It's to go around healing. It's something I'm going to do all the way through. But I'm very lucky as well that I can do decent damage as a Holy Paladin. just with a decent two-hander. So a lot of what happens, a lot of the damage I do from the two-hander, I've gone down the notion of a very slow, high damage two-hander. And what that does is a lot of damage, and it scales with your judgments as well. So my judgments when I'm playing a bit more offensively. So at the moment, obviously, playing very defensively. Mana management is my key. If I was out in the open world, I'd be playing a bit more offensively with my judgments. It's another fairly big pull here. So generally speaking, you try and pull 1 or 2 of these mobs at a time. So to be pulling 3 or 4 as a level 19 is pretty ballsy in hardcore. But at that point, I guess he's got faith in his group in terms of the DPS output and the healing capabilities that are coming forward to do this. And again, even here, you don't really want to pull Cookie with a mob here. But this guy, you know, he's like, whatever, I'll just charge in. You know, so what? You know, you got me, guys. So, two fairly sloppy pulls there on bosses, and you know, you just play a little bit slower here, so you can get a bit of mana regen off. A couple of flash of lights, there's a cancelled flashlight there to a down-ranked holy light, just to save a bit of mana and get a slightly bigger heal off. And then it's just a case of a bit of extra melee just to help out here where required. And of course, Cookie Stirring Rod drops when I'm on my Paladin, which is slightly ironic. My mage is, I think, 10 Deadmine runs deep, and I haven't had a single piece of loot yet, so that's the nature of the beast. I can't complain with my priest, though. The priest has had the luck of the drops. Scarlet Monastery kitted out in its entirety, and yeah, I've done alright on my priest. And Luminous gets a little bit here, a little bit there. Doesn't get much out of this dungeon, but at the same time, it's about XP and it's about leveling. It's about the experience. I live for dungeons. It's why I play World of Warcraft. 5-man dungeon content for me is the pinnacle, and I obviously got really deep into Mythic Plus in retail for a year or two. But I found the time was difficult at the time in my life that I was. Now made a conscious decision a couple of weeks back or a couple of months back to get something and get a hobby and something that I can enjoy doing, a lot for my family, a lot for the kids, a lot of the businesses, a lot for the community. And then I was like, do you know what, I'm going to enjoy myself as well in the evening. So my routine now, 2-3 days a week, I'm on Warcraft for 3 or 4 hours in the evening, leveling, doing videos, hanging, questing, exploring on the auction house. Just got my mount on Landro, and that's the sort of thing again that it's not cheap. It's not cheap getting a mount in Classic. Getting to 100 gold is difficult. So a lot of wool, manipulating the wool market for a few weeks to get enough gold. But yeah, it's been good. It's been really fun. And again, these elements, these dungeons are for me a very key part of why I play World of Warcraft, and healing them particularly. So you go back into melee range, get a little swing off. There's another fairly crazy pull here if I recall. I think it might be 3 or 4 mobs, but again, it's not too prevalent. Yes, 4 mobs, not too prevalent in this group. And again, I'm assuming the tank is just tested and is confident at this point. But I'm playing a bit slower. Where you see when the larger pulls, I don't really want to get too much in melee. One inadvertent stun or fear onto me is catastrophic, when the damage can be from 4 mobs much higher. So play a bit safer when there's multiple mobs in there, and then once we're safe, I can go in and then I can do my little bit, help a little bit. Obviously I've got Hammer of Justice there if needs be. I do want to save or make sure my Hammer of Justice is up for VanCleef, because I can do another little bit of shenanigans on VanCleef, which I will show you in a second. But it's key here, and this is an element I was talking about of communicating here. So I want to say now, get it out there nice and early, rebuff and wait, basically, because I'm under that threshold for where I'm comfortable with my mana. Everybody's going to get a rebuff, which is going to take more of my mana. As you can see, it completely ooms me, as it turns out. Even buff the pets at this point. Why not? Give the little Tuskian Cerimina a bit of a buff as well. Then sit and drink, and then, you know, after you've applied your 5-minute buffs, toilet break. That's the nature. That's the nature of social gaming. Everybody's got their own lives to lead, and I think that's something important to remember when you're doing World of Warcraft, and any game. You know, it's something I'm trying to teach my kids nowadays. Is just remember that these pixels and this game that we're playing and the joy we get is what it's all about. If you're not getting joy out of the game you're playing, then don't play it. if it's making you stressed or anxious, or you feel like you're obliged to be on it every night for other people's benefits, just knock it on the head, because the number one thing from gaming, any type of gaming, is joy. And you know, that's what it's all about. And I you know, Fortnite obviously is my two boys' main game, and they get they're very well behaved, but sometimes they get very stressed with that. And I just sort of say to them, guys, you get to that point, you'll feel a lot happier about yourself if you have a break. And that's something very hard to do. But also, as a dad, you can teach your kid healthy and appropriate gaming, and that's what it's all about. So what the hunter is talking about there is the safe spot. So in Deadmines, in this very dangerous area. Now, why this is dangerous is one of the bosses patrols across the top of this decking here. So where we are now, it's very... Speaking of which, the road just fell off the edge there. It's also very dangerous. Thankfully, we cleared most of the way down, so we're a man down here at this point. We've done a larger pull again. But yeah, it's very easy to pull from the top conduit there, and just to my left there's that very large wheel. If you jump on that, it's a safe spot away from damage and aggro, and the mobs can't get you, and because the mobs can't hit you, then it becomes an evade area. So it's very good to jump on there if you aggro too many on this point, but mostly if you aggro the little patrolling boss with his two mobs before you cleared the entire walkway up there. So our tank here, Trembolini, who's in the same guild as me, I didn't realise until halfway through this dungeon. They were found on the Looking For group. Shows a perfect example of where you go if you need to get safe. It's right over there, and then the mobs will eventually evade and reset, and you can jump back in, which is really useful. A chest spawn there, which is really interesting. I don't think actually we went back and got this. I rolled on it, the hunter rolled on it, and I think I just walked off at the end. Pretty sure that's what happened. I think it spawned. I mean, you'll see that on the footage, but yeah, I'm pretty sure we left that there now, thinking about it. Interesting. So yeah, this little bit by here, so you can see there's quite a few mobs. Again, 3 mobs. And just to our right, you'll see a blue square coming into view up by the buffs there. That's a patrolling boss, and if he comes too close to that edge, it's very easy to pull him. And he'll run towards you and pull all those remaining mobs as well. And it can be difficult if you're not fully equipped. You obviously can go to the reset point if you feel like you need to. A lower level tank could very quickly die in that scenario. So obviously, a little warning again, have no humility. And I think I put just that here now. It's I know you guys know, but it's worth pointing it out, because the amount of times I've seen people just run up there, and yeah, it's very easy to pull and cause a wipe in the most innocuous moments. So I did another little rebuff here. I'm doing it a slightly different way here because these are preemptive buffs before they've actually worn off, so they aren't showing on my heal bot yet. When they show on the heal bot, I can just left click and it does it. But in this case, I have to. And I accidentally, I wonder how I did that. So I thought I had the tank targeted, so you can see there I accidentally gave myself Blessing of Might here. And I noticed that in a little bit now. And it's one of the things I'm struggling with my Paladin at the moment, is to just mod up my own buffs a little bit better. I think it's because they're 5 minutes, you have to do it so regularly. You have to do it 6 or 7 years a charge in when I'm at about half mana, which isn't advisable. But there we go. Yeah, monitoring those around you, and I think this is where I noticed I haven't got Blessing of Wisdom up. I was like, where's all my mana gone? Because it does make a big difference. But yeah, quick dispel there, so there was a poison that came out from the boss there, so I've got my poison, I've got my cleanse key bound to my heal bot as well, so I can very quickly just nuke that away where needed. And I noticed I got Blessing of Might. There we go, at least I noticed now. So I give myself Blessing of Wisdom at that point. And of course, there we go, Blessing of Wisdom, that's what I wanted up. And a few melee swings. And I'm just confirming that I stun at 55%. Here's my prime amount. then we go to the final boss, VanCleef. Now, very easy to wipe on this boss, not going to lie. If you don't do it right, if you just ignore the ads, if you are a little bit undergeared and perhaps getting too many crushing blow type effects, or if you're just not really with it, the ads can get a bit out of hand. But obviously, if you've got a stun effect and you can stun VanCleef, and if you can stun him on the right percentage, so obviously I'm looking to stun around about the 55%. I think I might go a little bit late on this actually, I can't remember, but all I'm doing here is getting melee range on the boss so that any downtime would hit a swing. So you'll probably see one here now. There we go, a little 73 damage. He's at 90%, so you can see in the brackets there we've got the overall health pool and the percentage. A lot of stuff done on percentage, so I'm being super careful there. I actually forego a heal here so that I have got a global cooldown for my stun. Stunning exactly on 55%, look at that. And by foregoing that heal for a second, I knew my tank was good. It meant I got the stun off when I wasn't on a global cooldown. And we actually get a really nice drop. Now, I wasn't sure about needing on that to start with. I thought one of the hunters might need it. Turns out they both pass. So I think the tank needs... And I just double check what his gear is relative to mine. So you can see it's a huge upgrade for me. It's lose 1 agility to gain 11 stamina. And stamina in the hardcore challenge is incredibly important. So it was a very good upgrade for me. And I was going to put as anybody needed, and just as I do that I see that the tank needs, but I do ask him first what his current gear is, and it's an equal upgrade for both of us really here. So I try to inspect him again, he's running off, so I just ask in chat, and I end up winning this. And that is Deadmines healing from a Paladin's perspective. And what I'll do tomorrow is, as it turns out, he's got a much better chest than I have. What I'll do tomorrow is do some on my priest. So we'll get some of the latter or higher end dungeons. We'll do some Scarlet Monastery, even though he's a little bit high for Scarlet Monastery now. It's a dungeon I can do and talk about on the way. And I might get the camera up. We'll see how these go down in terms of content. But I've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed it. This is Paladin Hardcore Classic Healing Deadmines. I will see you guys around. Hopefully you enjoy the content. Give me some feedback on what you would like and what you wouldn't like. These are videos designed to have on as you're doing your own little thing in life. This is the sort of videos I watch, and this is the sort of videos I'm going to be creating going forward. So thank you very much. It's good to be back on the channel. Landro out.